I'm a 23-year-old female, and I have a younger sister, Lisa, who's 18. I believe she is the true incarnation of evil on Earth. I've tried my best over the years to convince my parents to see the truth, but they never believed me. At least, not until now. For context, my parents and I have always had a somewhat strained relationship, mainly because of Lisa. My parents absolutely adore her. This adoration stems from the fact that my mother had a miscarriage and lost the baby, which deeply affected her. Lisa, born a few years later, was regarded as their miracle child, a beacon of hope and joy that healed the pain of their previous loss. My parents showered her with affection and attention, turning her into the center of our family universe. Now, let me be clear, I loved my younger sister when we were children. It's just that I slowly started realizing that Lisa had an incredible talent for manipulation that none of my family members were able to grasp. She knew how to twist the story in her favor and was a master at playing the victim card. Once, on my birthday, I received an amazing antique pocket watch from our grandparents. I was so happy with it, especially since my grandmother told me it was a family heirloom. But Lisa was clearly jealous and kept asking if I could share it with her. I said no because it was a gift for me on my birthday. She tried to persuade our parents, but since it was from our grandparents, they couldn't do much. That night, Lisa, who knew I was terrified of spiders, placed a house spider inside my pillowcase, ensuring I would discover it when I went to bed. I awoke to the horrifying sensation of a spider crawling over my skin and started screaming. My parents rushed to my room, concerned. Lisa acted all surprised and caring, but later, when we were alone, she admitted with a creepy grin that she put the spider there to teach me a lesson. I was shocked by how casually she confessed, without any remorse. Another time, I remember when I had a crush on my classmate Mark. I finally had the courage to invite him over to watch a movie with me. I was feeling all giddy and excited, and had carefully picked out a dress to impress him. But as soon as Mark arrived at our house, Lisa deliberately spilled a glass of juice all over my dress and started laughing at me. I was mortified and had to change, all while trying to hide my embarrassment. As if that wasn't enough, Lisa started telling Mark embarrassing stories from my childhood, making me feel utterly humiliated. She didn't leave us alone the entire time we watched the movie. When Mark was about to leave, Lisa smirked and told him that he could do much better than me. Mark, who had been uncomfortable the entire time, left in a hurry. I just couldn't believe how cruel and cunning my younger sister could be. Over the years, I told my parents about her antics several times, but they always chalked it up to her being young and naive. They just couldn't see her for who she really was. Whenever I complained, they dismissed me and thought of me as the troublemaker in the family. So I eventually stopped speaking up about her. Lisa continued being their favorite child, while I, always straightforward, often felt like the outsider in my own family. I focused on my studies and managed to get into a good college, which gave me a chance to move out of our house and have a better life. In college, however, every time I returned home during breaks, Lisa made it abundantly clear that she despised having me back in the house. She would deliberately ignore me, refusing to engage in even the most basic conversations. During family meals, she would avoid sitting next to me or interrupt me if I was talking to our parents. Her constant need to undermine my presence was evidence that she despised the idea of me being around and was determined to make my visits as uncomfortable as possible. Lisa even used to mess with my stuff, pretending that she needed to borrow things, but would often damage or lose them instead. My parents did nothing when I tried to complain, and instead urged us to get along with each other. As a result, I began avoiding coming home during breaks. I would come up with excuses to spend my breaks with my college friends' families instead. Truth be told, my parents didn't mind as much and chalked it up to me being independent and wanting to enjoy some time away from home. When Lisa graduated from high school, she didn't have the grades for college, so she settled for community college instead. This meant that she never had to move out of our parents' place. These days, I am working at a multinational corporation in San Francisco, and I genuinely enjoy my job. I sometimes stay in touch with my parents, but rarely visit back home. I don't maintain any contact with Lisa whatsoever. Now, here's where things take a turn. My father recently had a near-fatal heart attack. Fortunately, he survived by some miracle and was rushed to a hospital. When my mother called to tell me about it, I immediately booked my tickets and flew back home to be there for them. The doctors prescribed numerous medications for my father and strongly advised him to start working out. Since being discharged, my father has expressed spending more time with us as a family and told me how lucky he was to be saved from the brink of death. I understood where my dad was coming from, so I continued spending a few days at our house. My job has the option to work remotely, so it was no problem. However, I noticed that Lisa was deeply agitated that I was back. I tried my best to avoid her, as we were both older now and I didn't want to argue. After my dad's heart attack, one morning during breakfast, my father suggested that we all go on a family vacation since it had been a long time since we all went somewhere together. Initially, I had my reservations, but knowing how important it was to my dad, I agreed. As for Lisa, well, she wasn't thrilled about it, but she had no choice but to go along with the plan. My father made all the arrangements for our flights and accommodations. I had planned my leave from work in advance and informed my colleagues not to contact me during this time, as I genuinely wanted to enjoy quality time with our parents. However, when we arrived at the airport, I found out that my flight ticket had been canceled. I exchanged puzzled looks with my father, who kept insisting that he had booked and paid for my ticket. When we checked further, it turned out that out of the 4 tickets, the one with my name on it had been mysteriously canceled. As I stood there trying to comprehend the situation, I looked over at Lisa. She had a sly smile on her face as she stared at me. It was the same expression she wore when she had successfully pulled off one of her manipulative tricks. I realized at that moment that she was the one who had canceled my ticket, probably from my father's computer. I started yelling at her as she continued to stand there, smiling at me. I pointed out to my parents that it was Lisa's doing, as she never wanted me to go on this family vacation in the first place. Instead of believing me, my mother immediately dismissed my claim, saying, "Your sister would never do something like that." She went on to tell me that I should stop being jealous of my younger sister and that it was just a freak accident that my ticket had been canceled. My father also tried to justify that this might have been an airline mistake and I shouldn't blame it on my sister. I was utterly frustrated that my parents couldn't fathom that their beloved miracle child would be behind such a deception. At this point, there was nothing I could do. My ticket was already canceled, and there were no other flights for that day. While it was possible for me to catch a flight the next day, I didn't relish the idea of returning home, booking a new flight, and traveling alone. After all, this was supposed to be a family trip. I was also dreading sharing a room with Lisa during this trip. I had hoped that she had matured over the years, but if she was behind the cancellation of my flight ticket, I couldn't help but wonder what other schemes she might have in store to make my trip miserable. My father was initially hesitant, suggesting they could all go back home and plan a new trip later, but he then started talking about how it had been ages since he went on a vacation. My mother agreed, telling me that I always travel a lot for work, so I wasn't going to miss out on much on this trip if I didn't go. Their comments really got to me. It felt like they wanted me to insist they continue to go on this vacation without me. I told them they were welcome to continue with their vacation if they wanted, and they readily agreed. Although I didn't want the money they had spent on the tickets and rooms to go to waste, I was sad that they didn't care whether I joined them or not. It became clear they didn't mind going on this family vacation as a family of 3. So there I was, standing alone at the airport as my parents and Lisa headed for their much-anticipated vacation. I decided to return to my home in San Francisco, not wanting to spend a day further alone in our family house. I tried my best to put the incident behind me and focused on enjoying the rest of my leave that I'd already taken from work. I reconnected with old friends and spent my days engrossed in books, turning my break into a solo vacation. During the trip, my parents would sometimes video call me, and I could see how much they were enjoying the trip without me. It was like my absence didn't really affect their vacation in any way. Although I wasn't too heartbroken about missing the vacation, I couldn't help but feel excluded. It was yet another reminder of the favoritism that had always existed in our family. I hoped that someday they would see through Lisa's true nature, and I guess my wish finally came true. A few days into their vacation, I woke up to several missed calls from my mother, worried that my father's health might have taken a sudden downturn. I immediately called her back. Thankfully, she picked up, but she sounded extremely distressed. I asked her if everything was okay, and she went on to explain that something deeply troubling had happened. Apparently, my parents had noticed that my father's essential heart medications were disappearing day by day. It was an alarming situation, as my father couldn't afford to miss his medication, given his fragile health. They were in a foreign country, and didn't know if the same medicine would be available outside of the US. They were genuinely concerned about the missing pills, and searched their room everywhere in vain. My mother had gone to Lisa's hotel room, which was adjacent to theirs, to borrow some sunscreen. While Lisa was out, to her utter shock and dismay, she discovered all the missing medicines carefully tucked away inside Lisa's bedside table. It was a chilling revelation, and she immediately called for my father. He rushed in and found all of his medication, which had been missing for the past few days. I think this was when the truth finally dawned on them, that their beloved daughter, the so-called miracle child, had been intentionally jeopardizing my father's health and putting him at great risk. My mother's voice quivered as she asked if they should confront Lisa about this. I asked her not to speak to Lisa about it just yet. They needed to gather their thoughts, emotions, and evidence before confronting her with the undeniable truth. I knew speaking to Lisa now would be futile. She was a master manipulator and would likely concoct excuses to avoid taking responsibility. However, something unexpected must have happened. My parents must have confronted her. I received a late-night call from my father. His voice trembled as he informed me that Lisa had been arrested. I was taken aback. He recounted how Lisa had a full-blown tantrum when they confronted her about the missing medications, throwing objects and shouting insults. Her rage was primarily directed at my father, accusing him of booking a ticket for me when he should never have allowed me on their family vacation. She told them that if they continued having a relationship with me, she would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Lisa continued to lash out, and the situation escalated rapidly. A hotel staff member called the authorities. When the officers arrived, she refused to calm down, insulting them, which led to her being taken into custody. Lisa would be released after 24 hours, but my parents were left stranded in a foreign country with no passports or wallets. It turned out Lisa had either discarded or hidden their passports, and for the moment, they were stuck without any way to return home. This was when my parents finally started to see Lisa for who she really was. My mother, who had always defended Lisa, was now overwhelmed, shocked, and distraught at the realization of her angelic daughter's true nature. She called me, tearfully asking for help, as they had no money or documents to fly out. I told them not to worry, and that I would send money through Western Union once they found their passports. I knew Lisa hadn't discarded them. She had likely hidden them away. For the first time, my parents began to realize that I had been honest about Lisa's actions all along. They apologized for their behavior, and while part of me wanted to forgive them, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been deprived of their love for all these years due to their favoritism toward Lisa. I felt bitter that they had gone on this vacation without me, only to return begging for my forgiveness. Update 1. Every day, my parents called with updates, and I grew increasingly anxious about their situation. After Lisa's release from jail, my parents confronted her again, threatening to call the authorities if she didn't return their passports. With no other choice, Lisa eventually revealed where she had hidden them. Upon their return home, they confronted her, making it clear that she needed to gather her things and leave. The moment had finally arrived, the breaking point. Lisa, in a fit of rage, hurled accusations at my parents, expressing her anger and resentment. She told them she didn't want to share them with anyone else, claiming that she had been pushed to the brink when they invited me on the trip. She insisted they should disown me, emphasizing that she was enough for both of them. At that moment, I think my parents truly understood the depths of her jealousy and the extent of her resentment towards me. During the confrontation, Lisa also threatened to accuse them of neglecting her as a child and to make false allegations of abuse to the police if they didn't let her stay. The threat of false accusations, particularly considering their respective positions in the community, left my parents feeling trapped and scared. Lisa's behavior continued to worsen, making their lives increasingly difficult. She became enraged when she discovered that my parents were speaking to me regularly, even breaking dishes in her fury. Worse yet, she started stealing their car keys and hiding them, making it difficult for them to even go to work. Just tonight, my mother called me in tears after another outburst during dinner. Lisa had thrown a tantrum, demanding that my mother cook for her. When my mother refused because she was tired from work, Lisa went on a rampage, breaking furniture and blasting loud music from her room, preventing my parents from getting any rest. This situation is taking a heavy toll on my parents emotionally and mentally. I'm increasingly concerned about what might happen next. While I'd hoped my parents would see Lisa's true nature, I now worry that she could pose a real threat to them. I can't even return home at the moment, as it might trigger further explosive confrontations. I've been urging my parents to consult a lawyer, as the legal route might be the only way to protect them and restore peace to the family. Update 2. As many of you predicted, Lisa's antics eventually led to her being arrested. One night, she came at my parents with a knife during a fight, terrifying them to the point where they had no choice but to call the police. The officers swiftly took her into custody on charges of assault. With Lisa in jail, my parents decided to pursue a more permanent solution. They consulted an attorney about evicting her from their home and filed a formal eviction notice. It wasn't easy, but they knew it was necessary for their safety. They decided not to press further charges, as they just wanted Lisa to move out. They bailed her out of jail and handed her the eviction notice, explaining the legal steps they were taking. They made sure everything was done by the book, so she couldn't challenge it. My parents then went to court to begin the eviction process, filing a lawsuit against their own daughter. It was an emotionally difficult decision for them, as they never expected to have to take Lisa to court. The court issued an official order for Lisa to leave the house. If she didn't leave voluntarily, my parents now had the legal right to have her removed. Lisa will be out by next week, and my parents can finally breathe a sigh of relief. They've taken a step toward restoring peace in their home, and while the road ahead will still be challenging, they are hopeful things will get better once she's gone. I've been in touch with them throughout this ordeal, and now that the eviction is underway, I plan to bring them to San Francisco for a few weeks. They need a break after everything they've been through, and I'm sure a change of scenery will do them good. It will also give us the chance to spend quality time together, and I want to support them as much as I can. Update 3. I've received hundreds of comments on my posts, and it's taken me some time to read through them all. Many of you have suggested getting Lisa checked for a possible mental health issue. The thing is, since she's an adult, we can't force her to seek help, especially with her violent outbursts. We don't want to make the situation worse by pushing her into something she doesn't want. As I mentioned before, my parents are in San Francisco with me, spending time away from the stress of their lives. Last night, as we gathered around the dining table in my cozy apartment, my parents began to open up. Their voices were full of humility and regret as they admitted they had been blind to Lisa's true nature all these years and begged for my forgiveness. My father expressed remorse for not listening to my warnings sooner. He admitted they never expected Lisa to turn out this way, and they had failed to see the truth beneath her charming facade. My mother echoed his sentiments, her voice trembling as she acknowledged how their favoritism had blinded them to the pain I had suffered. It was a bittersweet moment for me. I had always wanted their acknowledgement, but I could never have imagined it happening like this. I shared with them the painful memories of the years of torment I had endured because of Lisa's actions. My parents listened, shocked and dismayed at the extent of what I had been through on my own. They expressed regret over the isolation I had felt in our family, and I knew they understood, at least now, how deep the wounds had been. I told them it would take time for me to trust them again, but we agreed to work through this together. For now, I plan to make the most of the time I have with them while they're here in San Francisco, away from the chaos Lisa caused. Update 4. As the days have passed, my parents and I have spent more time together, exploring San Francisco, enjoying leisurely meals, and simply relishing each other's company. Rebuilding the bonds that had been frayed by years of favoritism and denial has been a journey. I've come to understand that their decision to seek solace with me isn't just about distancing themselves from Lisa, but also about trying to rebuild a family they almost lost. We all needed a fresh start. We've discussed what to do with Lisa, and while she's currently staying at a friend's house, we can't just abandon her. My parents still feel a profound sense of responsibility toward her, even though her actions have been unforgivable. We've come to terms with the fact that her behavior might not just be willful mischief, but could be indicative of deeper issues. We plan to encourage her to seek a mental health evaluation, but since she's an adult, we can't force her into it. When my parents return home, they plan to reach out to Lisa to see if she'll agree to counseling, but we're preparing ourselves for the possibility that she might not accept help. For now, we're simply taking it one step at a time. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.